Hey there, storytellers. Mary Rose here. And I have to say, shh, because today we're going to talk about secrets. What secrets? Writing secrets. Most of what writers do, the actual work of writers, is secret. It's private. It is the kind of stuff that under normal circumstances, you're just never going to get to see other writers do, and other writers are never going to get to see you do it. And the problem with this is that this is why when you're kind of starting out as a writer, it's very hard to know exactly how it's done. But here's the thing, the secret stuff that writers do is actually the most important stuff. It's the most important part of our work. And if you don't do it, this is when you're going to have all those struggles that I know writers come up against over and over again. So if you are really intent on writing good fiction that vividly expresses the story that you want to tell, that you know that you can get actually truly ready and worthy of publication and delight the readers that are out there waiting for it to finally come out of the secrecy and into the light, knowing what this secret work is going to help you achieve your goals. And it may really change the way you think about what your job is as a writer. So what is the secret work? That's what I'm going to talk about today. I've got a few different secrets to share with you. Shh. The last one's going to be the most important, so I hope you will stay around to the end. So before we get into the content, let me just introduce myself to anybody that's new here or maybe is watching the replay. My name is Mary Rose Wood. I am a writer myself. I'm best known for writing middle grade fiction. Some of you may have read my Incorrigible Children of Ashton Place books, which is a 6-book series. You might be familiar with Alice's Farmer Rabbit's Tale. I've published 14 books with Big 5 publishers, so I've been doing this a long time. And when I talk about the secret work of writers, just know that it's because I myself have spent a lot of time behind that veil of secrecy doing the work. I'm also the founder of Path of the Storyteller, which is my own platform for teaching and mentoring writers. It is just an absolutely wonderful community. And I hope that you will take advantage of this little freebie that I have for you. It's a download that you can find at pathofthestoryteller.com/challenge. It's a collection of writing prompts that will lead you through story structure from beginning through the middle to the end. I'm hearing a lot of good things from the writers who are out there working with it. It's helping them get past the blank page and into developing not just words on the page, but the kinds of actual baby scenes, the responses to writing prompts that really have the makings of a complete story. So please help yourself to that. I'll post that link in the description box below as well. If you're new to the YouTube channel, I also ask that you subscribe. I go live here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time to talk about writing craft, story structure, and the mindset of the working, thriving writer. And sometimes, like today, I also tell secrets. Before we start telling those secrets, let me just say hi to some of the folks who are already saying hi in the comments. Hillary, I'm really glad you're here. Hello to you. Constanza, delighted to have you here as well. I can see that some of the rest of you are here live as well, according to the head count, but you're remaining secret at this time. That's okay. It's perfectly in keeping with the vibe. So listen, let's dive in, okay? And I'll let you decide at the end of this talk whether you want to share this intel with your writing friends. I hope that you will, actually. So secrets. Some things are done in public, right? The world can see them. And some things are done in private. And this is normal. It's not a sign of nefariousness. It's not a sign of espionage or conspiracy. It's just the range of human experience. Some things are public, some are in private. But the things that happen in private, we sometimes will have results that we can see. And so those things are done in private, but the results are public. And if I have to share with you, my favorite example of this is my dear mom, who used to have the most gorgeous head of hair, and she wore it in this like elaborate, kind of curled all over her head, sort of up to very stylish gal. And that all happened behind the bathroom door closed. And I just thought as a kid that my mom's hair did that. That it just, that she woke up that way, as they say nowadays. And of course, it didn't. Like, she was in there with rollers and things. Like, she was making this happen. But when she came out of the bathroom, it was done. And so I saw the result and I thought that's what my mom's hair is like. But then, later on when I was like in the drama club at school and they said, "Oh, you're playing a character who might have like an updo and a this and a that." And I was like, "Well, my hair doesn't do that." It's like, "Well, no, you have to make your hair do that." And I was like, "Oh, that's what's going on in the bathroom." So the actual work of it happens in private, but the results can be, public. This is one of the reasons that we all love a behind the scenes peek. This is one of those popular forms of content, whether it's reality television or somebody's, Instagram live where they take you behind the scenes of something like that. We suspect, right, that there's more to it than meets the eye. And this is extremely true of writers. Now, in the spirit of making things visible, I actually have some slides to share with you today. So let me just add these to the stream. I'm going to just make this a little easier for us to see by simplifying the background. There we go. So we are going to talk about this secret work of writers. I can't promise that you're going to have a better hairdo by the time we're done, but I think you might have a better idea of what's going on behind those closed doors. And, behind closed doors in terms of being a writer, it really means inside our heads, doesn't it? I mean, that's where a lot of the sort of special secret work that we do takes place. So I want to start with a saying, and it's like so many sayings. The attribution is a little secret. It's a little mysterious because it's just wisdom. And wisdom has a way of being expressed in different ways by different people at different points in history. But this wisdom it has that kind of timeless quality. And here it is. You will be rewarded in public for the work you do in private. I have seen this attributed to a great many people. So I'm just not going to attribute to anyone. We'll just call it timeless wisdom. I hope you're all okay with that. You will be rewarded in public for the work you do in private. So this is the principle that we're working with today, because a lot of times writers want the public part. They want the public part, meaning that they want to be validated externally. They want the finished book out in the bookstores. They want, to have certain kinds of outcomes. They want to have a popular book. They want to have a book that's made into a movie. They want the public rewards. And it's not wrong to want those things. But the problem is that you don't get those things without doing the work in private. And because that work is done in private, we cannot help but be a little vague about what exactly it is, because we actually never get to see people do it. This is one of the things that I talk about when I use the phrase writing by ear. When writers try to teach themselves how to write by ear, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's how we all begin. How else could we begin? We don't get to see the public part of other writers' processes. We only get to see the tip of the iceberg. And so we think that because we read a lot, because we're seeing the public part, that's what we should be aiming for, that we should somehow be teaching ourselves to write by reading. So this is what I mean, teaching ourselves to write by ear. But that finished work, that public part, truly is just like the very end of a long journey, most of which we don't have access to seeing. And it's the naivete of me thinking that my mom's hair just kind of woke up like that without her doing it all is like a childish and silly and personal example of this. And so we really can be blamed for it, right? Because if we haven't seen the work done, all we see is the public outcome. And I just want to emphasize this because writers can get really down on themselves. Writers can get super frustrated when they try to, undertake to write a novel, for example, which is a long, complex project. And then they start to realize how hard it is, and they start to feel very challenged, and they get very frustrated. It's very emotional. I really understand how emotional this is for storytellers who are really developing their work. They want it so badly. They can tell so easily what good work is, right? Because they're just literate, story-loving, book-loving people. But when they sit down to do it, and it's just not doable, they just can't figure it out. They blame themselves. And I want to linger with this topic just for a second before you move on to the next slide, because I just don't want you to do that. I don't want you to be so hard on yourselves. If someone had set me loose in the bathroom with my mom's set of curlers and clips and hairsprays and told me, "We'll make your hair look like your mom's," I would have had no idea how to do it, right? It's just not a reasonable expectation. So don't start using words like, "Oh, I'm not disciplined enough," or "I don't have the talent," or "I'm just, dense," or whatever it is. Just put all that stuff aside. How could you know how to do it if you've never seen the actual process of doing it? You've only seen the stuff that's in public. All right. And here's another image for you. Like even like in a disaster movie, right, those flight attendants, of course, this happens in real life, a flight attendant or a passenger who's called upon to land a plane in an emergency. Like the flight attendant has probably seen the pilot land a plane. So we might say that's incredibly heroic. You've never done it before. And look, you managed it. But even they have seen the pilot do it before. And they've got someone in the earpiece telling them what to do step by step. Okay. So just be easy on yourselves. I also want to note that this is, in my experience, why writers are so obsessed with process and are always asking more experienced writers, "Well, how do you do it? How long did it take you to do? Do you outline first, or do you go by the seat of your pants? What do your outlines look like?" Like they always want to know the process. And it's this very understandable hunger to just say, "Please show me how it's done in the private place that I can't see so that I can learn how to do it too." So that's what we're going to try to do today. That's why I'm here for you guys. All right. That's what this YouTube channel is all about. That's what Path of the Storyteller is all about, honestly. So we'll get back to that later. Let's move on to see what's really behind that curtain, the secret work of writers. So we're going to start at the bottom of the pyramid. So this is now the part of the writer's work that nobody sees but that writer. And you'll see here that I'm putting at the bottom of our little pyramid or iceberg, choose your image, the words receptivity, research, and brainstorming. Now, receptivity is a really interesting word, right? It sounds a little like passive. It sounds a little like, well, we're not actually out on the hunt of anything. We're just being receptive. Now, I don't know how it feels to you all, but in my experience as a writer and with the writers that I work with and know, this quality of being receptive is where it all begins, because we just have to have our senses open to the world, right? And we go through our lives and we're sensitive to what's happening. It's an openness that I think is very much at the heart of any creative personality, that you notice things. You notice how people behave. You notice subject matter. You might notice things happening in nature. You might read a newspaper article or a magazine story, or something might happen in the world that gets you a little worked up. You can't stop thinking about it. Or maybe it's something very particular. Maybe you just come across a book in a bookshop and it's about some obscure topic and you just can't stop thinking about it. Or you learn something about a historical figure and all of a sudden you think, wow, that is so interesting. I want to know more about that person. Now, you know what happens then, right? As soon as we're interested, serendipity kicks in. And we start finding references to that person everywhere. And, that subject starts popping up. And, pretty soon we're enrolling in classes. We're subscribing to newsletters. We're just sort of tracking it down. So the receptivity portion starts to become intentional. We start to actually do, maybe research. And before you know it, you are actually brainstorming. What if this were a story, right? What if this were a story? So at this moment, your next book is in that like a gleam in your eye stage. It's maybe before you've got much concrete to offer about who it might be about or what it might be about, but you've already crossed that a very important threshold, which is like, this isn't just something that fascinates me. This is something that I think I want to write a book about. Ooh. So that's a really, really important part of the creative process. And I think that that's basically the life of the writer. So that's why I kind of give it pride of place here. It's the life of the writer. It's the life of a creative person, to be receptive, to allow yourself to be moved by things, to be intrigued by things, to become curious about things, and then to let that kind of mature into a creative impulse to do something with that interest, that curiosity, right? So, that phrase when that people say, well, someone's with child. This is when you are with book. You are with book all of a sudden. What is this book going to be? You don't know yet, but it's official. And one day you're going to decide to cross the line and actually do what? Start writing. You are going to be working on a book. And I have to say, by this point, this borderland between, this where I've got number 5 written, this sort of bottom category of secret, private interior work, moving into category number 4, next up on the pyramid. It may not be like a very clean line. It may be kind of a mushy line. So it's not going to be the same for everyone. But by the time you actually start drafting, putting words down on paper that are an attempt to start creating this book, you may already have a lot of notes and files and research and clippings. I mean, you may have already done a bit of that during your receptivity research and brainstorming phase. But what's different now is that you're actually trying to think of it as a manuscript, and you're actually trying to start to organize this into a story. This is a really big moment. This is when you're starting to say, well, how do I turn this into art? How do I make art out of my fascination with whatever it is? So what does that entail? This is all secret work. This is going on privately, unobserved. Some of the basics my Path of the Storyteller students will know and hopefully can recite along with me. But some of the basic things that you're going to be exploring during your early attempts to get some stuff on paper have to do with structure. All right. They have to do with storytelling, story structure. Questions like, well, who is this story about? Who is the hero? Right? Who is the main character? What world are they living in? And that might mean what invented world, like, Bilbo Baggins lives in Bag End and Middle Earth, right? But it also might mean, top of mind to me today is the sort of classic YA novel, The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, which takes place in 1960s Tulsa, Oklahoma. So a really particular world, a particular social structures. Some of the kids live on the east side. Some of the kids live on the west side. Some of them are dirt poor. Some of them are privileged, right? Some of them have prospects. Some of them are going to, live and die in this town forever, right? Those are the rules of the world of your book. So even if you're writing not in a fantasy world, you still chosen kind of an arena for the game to be played. That's something that's got rules. So now you've got 2 really important things, right? You've got a world that's got a hierarchy, that's got a set of forces in it. It's very specific. And you've got this character in the middle of it. And then you've got to think about, where in this world does your character exist? Are they one of the privileged folks, or are they one of the disadvantaged folks? Is it a normal hobbit, or is it a special hobbit like Bilbo, who actually isn't 100% hobbit and actually has to kind of work a little bit to suppress the parts of him that are not authentically hobbit, right? So this intersection between the hero and the world that they live in is big part of this kind of private development of what your story structure is about. One of the things that you're going to have to figure out is, in what way is your hero's position in this world off balance? There's something unsustainable about the circumstance that they find themselves in, because a story is a depiction of a journey of change. That change has to be needed for the story to really engage the reader. If it's a change that's optional or a change that has no stakes attached to it, there's not much story energy flowing out of that kind of scenario. But a change that's urgent, a situation that is truly unsustainable, this can be revealed very early on in a story, and that is where the story is going to arise. And then when you've got that sorted out, you're going to convert this hero's need for transformation somehow into actual events, things that can be accomplished within the fictional world of a story. So it's not going to all be in the hero's head. You don't want to keep it that kind of secret. You want to create a story, a sequence of events, things that your hero can do, obstacles that they will face and attempt to overcome. And each time they have to attempt to overcome a force of opposition, that conflict is what drives the story forward, allows your hero to grow and change. So all of this stuff kind of has to happen in the world of the story. So where is the conflict coming from? What does your hero long to accomplish? What transformation is really needed, even if your hero doesn't quite know at the beginning, right? It's lots of thinking to do. You're also going to be, as part of inventing your hero's world, populating it with a secondary cast of characters. They are going to contribute something to the hero's journey of change, and you're going to want to know who they are and what contributions they're going to make. Some of them may be helpful. Some of them may be forces of opposition. Some of them may provide mentorship. Some of them may provide a little comic relief, that trickster energy. Like, there's all kinds of ways that secondary characters can contribute to this journey of change. And then you're going to do all of that. And then you're also going to rinse and repeat and do the same thing on a smaller scale for any subplots that may be truly essential to the work that you have in mind. Maybe there won't be major subplots in your book, but there might at least be like a thread of a secondary character who has an arc of transformation, or perhaps your main character will have a primary plot and a subplot that's the love story or a friendship story or something. You see, most of the stories that have multiple threads, right? The hero is often, while they're solving a big problem or on this big adventure and going through their personal transformation, there's other stuff spinning out in the world around them. There's always the Ron and Hermione sidekick story going on, or maybe the hero has it's kind of a secondary thing that they've got going on. So you've got to do all that thinking on a smaller scale for the subplots. So this was a lot of talking while looking at the same slide. So I hope you're not bored, but here's the thing. This is so much of the writer's work. This right here is so much of the writer's work. It's where the story itself gets discovered and tweaked and revised. And I just want to say, it's not going to happen in one afternoon. It's not going to happen in one go. It's not going to happen in one draft. So you'll see that the words here that I chose to label this were drafting and structural revision, finding the plot. So there is going to be drafting and revision here, but it's not general revision, it's structural revision. It's finding the plot. It's mapping it out. What is this book about? What are all the events of this book? How do they accrue into a well-told story? How do we demonstrate the hero's transformation at the end? There's a ton. Pretty much all of story structure is going to live in that place. And we have a really fun phrase that we use in the Path of the Storyteller program that I'm going to share with you if you haven't heard it already. We call it panning for gold. And it's because in order to create all of this material for your book, you really need to stand in the rushing stream of your own creativity with the muddy waters just rolling by you, and just embrace that you're about to get covered in mud, and that your little sieve and your buckets and the stuff that you're going to be scooping stuff out of this stream is going to be mostly mud. You're going to just gather bucket after bucket after bucket of mud. And that's great. That's what it's like. This is the secret work of writers. We're mud collectors. But then what happens is that we take the mud that we gather from this rushing stream and we put it through our little sieve, and we are panning for gold, and we are going to find the gold nuggets if we know what questions to ask. This whole litany of questions that I just went through. If we know what questions to ask, we're going to start to find gold nuggets. And when we find those gold nuggets, we keep them. We line them up on the shore. We put them away for safekeeping. Are they a finished book? No. But they are the stuff that we are going to build our structural underpinnings out of. All those ideas about character, settings, events that could happen, forces of opposition, right? All of the stuff that we just talked about, those are the gold nuggets. So you're going to find them, but then you're going to have to decide which ones you're going to keep, which ones you're going to toss back, and put them in order. You may find that some are missing and you got to go back into the stream, get a few more buckets of mud. You may find that you have too many and you're going to have to cull them a little bit. So that's why structural revision has to happen. You will find the plot. You will find it and you will build it out of what you find. I am not ever going to tell everyone to be an outliner or a pantser as if they were two different things. They're actually just two ways of talking about the same process. So that's what I'm describing here. You've got to get in there into the stream of your creativity, but you also have to be intentional about what you're looking for. It's not a passive process. So when you're pantsing, you're panning for gold, right? You may not know what it's going to be until you play around in the mud a little bit, but when you find it, you've got to be intentional, right? And when you're outlining, you cannot stand on the bank and never get covered with mud and think that you're going to have all the gold nuggets you need. You're going to have to get a little messy too. So that hopefully that's helpful too for those of you that are like, which should I do? Should I outline? Should I pants? Like, just get into the water, get covered with mud, find the gold. It'll all take care of itself. All right. There's one more thing that I want to reveal as part of the secret work that happens in this stage, and it doesn't get talked about that much in my experience, which is while you're doing this, even though we're not particularly concerned about language yet, because we're still looking for story, there are two elements of your finished book that you are going to, if you're smart, keep an eye out for. One of them is point of view, and the other is voice. Now, why do I say that? The minute you put any sentence down on paper that maybe has an intention of wanting to be in the manuscript of a book, it has a point of view of some kind or another. It sort of can't not have one. And so if you become attached to writing in first person or third person or a close point of view of this character and then or a close point of view of some other character, like you're making structural decisions, even though you don't know that you're making structural decisions. And you don't want to make those decisions randomly, because if you don't do it intentionally, the way you find the plot is going to be impacted by your careless choice of point of view and voice. If you're trying to find, for example, I'll throw out a few examples here. If you're thinking of a book like Alan Gratz's wonderful middle grade title, Refugee, which has 3 different stories in 3 different time periods with 3 different protagonists woven together thematically, that's a very particular structure, right? And so you would need, before you really drafted much of anything that was going to be usable, you would need to make a decision about how you were going to handle, right, that. So it's an example of how point of view is structure. If you decide to use an omniscient third-person narrator, as in The Hobbit, and you start to draft that way, only later on to decide that what you really want is a first-person, intimate, present-tense narrator, like in The Hunger Games, you've drafted a different book, right? Because once you're in first-person, present-tense protagonist, the kinds of scenes, events that you can incorporate that will qualify as gold nuggets are very different, because they all have to include the protagonist in a certain way, in a very immediate way. Whereas if you choose a different point of view, then you can incorporate scenes where there's scenes in The Hobbit that Bilbo isn't even in, right? So you see how the point of view becomes, it really is part of the structure. So people think of it as a writing craft topic, but it has so much to do with how we structure our narratives. So if you don't solve them now, you're going to be back to the drawing board later. And I want to prevent that from happening if I can. And voice, I mentioned, is the second one. And it's just the same. It's point of view and voice together help define what is possible in the world of your novel. So they are structural elements. They're structural elements. So what you want to do is you want to make sure the story stands up. And that's what we mean by structural revision. Does it have to be perfect? No, you're still a long way from done. But you want to make sure you've got the basics. There will be many iterations. Then what happens? Then, believe it or not, even though we're already exhausted, right, from thinking of all of this work, the secret work of writers, then that writer has to start to really think about the reader and how that reader's experience of this story is going to be determined by the language that we choose to use to bring it to life in their mind. Now, we're really lucky, because the reader's mind is so manageable. It's so willing to go along for the ride. Readers are really willing to suspend their disbelief. Everybody loves a great read. I mean, people love a book they can't put down. People want to get lost in a story. We don't have to convince them of this. We don't have to convince our readers of this at all. In fact, they come to every fresh reading experience like hoping that this is going to be like that. So that's why readers are phenomenal. But now we have to deliver the goods. So we have to come up with something where the language is vivid. It's not packed with cliches, it's not distant and formal. It really brings them into the world of the story that we have so meticulously designed for them. So this is a lot of work also. And so this I just call drafting and revision, crafting and polishing the language, right? So as opposed to finding the plot and making sure that the whole thing stands up structurally, now we're looking at crafting and polishing the language. Not so that we win a poetry award, not so that we get an A in English class in high school, so that we bring our story to life in the reader's brain. That is the whole point of everything to do with writing craft in fiction. Now, this is the first time that we're really looking at something that is sort of a product, right? That's something that as a writer, you might say, oh, well, sure, like good writing, good sentences, vivid sentences, on a page, that's writing. Now I really feel like a writer when I'm doing this writing stuff. And I just want to point out this little pitfall that I alluded to earlier, which is that the writer who has always ever been outside the bathroom door with no idea how mom's hair comes out looking so cute, this is where they might begin envisioning what a writer's job is, because the stuff below it on the pyramid is truly not intuitive. It's not something that you're going to pick up by ear necessarily. And so this desire to want to start writing sentences and polishing them and revising them and making them sound good, this is where some writers will begin their concept of what the work is, what this private work is. But I have to tell you, if you don't, look at what's underneath it, this is not the place to start. You've really missed out on some of the essential work of writers if you decide that you can skip to number 3 without looking at 4 and 5. Okay. Now, when you start with number 3, the symptoms of it are clear. You're going to have plot problems, right? Number 1, you're not going to know how to get through a whole story structure. Your draft is likely to get stalled somewhere near the beginning of the second act because you just don't know what to do, and that's if you haven't done the work in number 4, but if you haven't done the work down there in number 5 and you're writing about something that is not meaningful to you, that thematically doesn't have any depth, that you're not really connected to and haven't thought about a lot, your book is also going to be a little glib and superficial. So that's why I say you will get into trouble if you just try to cut the line and get in and starting here. Now, even the writing craft part is also, even though it's concrete and writers know what good writing looks like, presumably, the actual process of creating good writing also is something that most of us have never seen a seasoned writer do. And it can be very shocking when you see what is expected. We are so meticulous when we revise language. We go not a page at a time, not a paragraph at a time, not a sentence at a time. We go word by word. Word by word. We approach a novel, or should, the way a poet approaches poetry. Just because it's a longer work and it's narrative does not mean that the language can just kind of get a loose once over. It just doesn't get like a zhuzh. You have to look at it word by word in order to incorporate all of the level of writing craft, picking and choosing whether this is the right word or the almost right word, moving sentences around, being really attuned to duplications of meaning. Maybe when you've made the same point in slightly different ways, but a few different times, you have to catch that and get rid of the duplicates, turn them into the single best way to say it. And, compressing it, cutting out not just every word that's not necessary, but every syllable too. I mean, there's just a lot that you can bring to writing craft at a professional level. And it's not the kind of work that we usually get to see anybody doing. And when we do get to see someone doing it, it seems incredibly persnickety. All right. So this is another pitfall of all of this stuff being secret. All right. So guess what, though? It's time to slide out of the shadows and go public. The next thing that is part of a writer's process is the journey to publication. When you have finally gotten something that you think is ready, now you get to say, hey, everybody, hey, world, I'm here and I've got a book to show you, to sell you, to try to convince you to help me get published. And this journey to publication, and also, it starts to be the place where we are working with other people. So it is no longer a secret. But to many writers, it does feel like there's a lot that's very obscure about the journey to publication. And I very often see writers who simply don't know saying things like, well, you have to know someone, or it's impossible to get published, or or you have to pay someone to get published. I mean, they say things that are naive and inaccurate, but they will, just try to cover the fact that they have just never seen anybody do it, and they really don't have a realistic idea. So one of the things that you're going to do is educate yourself. You're not going to let this part of it be a secret to you. There's a lot to it. Obviously, if you make a decision about whether you want to seek traditional publication or be independently published, that's a whole decision that has to be made in a very well-informed way. And there's other folks that are going to get involved. If you want to get, even as an independent publisher, you're going to want to work with editors, book designers, cover artists. You're going to have to learn about your distribution options. That's not my area of expertise, because I've always been traditionally published so far. And but I encourage you, there's so much information out there, and you can, help yourself to it. Just make sure you do before you make any decisions. But if you want to go the traditional route of trying to find an agent and get published by an established publisher, then you've got other stuff to do that you may never have seen folks do. You were not raised in a household where people were sitting around writing query letters all day, were you? I mean, maybe you were, but maybe you have to really learn how to do it. And you also may not have ever been in a situation where it's normal to get rejected as much as writers get rejected. You may feel that if I send out a query letter and I get 3 or 4 or 5 responses that they're not interested, well, that book is no good. You may not be aware that behind the closed doors, behind the curtain of what writers really do, that they may get 50 or 100 rejections before the just right partners, get attracted to this project. So there's a lot that goes on behind closed doors in secret that just, you have to be aware of what it is, because you run the risk of making decisions based on what is evident, right? Based on just what is information that has been made public to you. Also know, as you can see here, as part of the journey to publication, I include final edits. And this is a slightly different process, because now the opinions about what needs to be changed about your book are not going to be coming from you. They're going to be coming from your editor at your publisher. And this is yet another round of what on earth is that kind of relationship like. If you've never had a relationship with an editor, you know, it's like being inside somebody else's marriage. Like, we don't know what goes on inside somebody else's homes, right? And so this too is a thing that we just haven't seen happen. We haven't had access to it until it happens to us. And then we're floundering. We're like, I don't know. Am I doing it right? How do I manage my relationship with my agent, my editor, the staff at the publisher? It's all the way through. There's this sort of constant sense of, I've never seen anybody do this, and now I'm expected to manage it. All right. Now, it looks like we have reached the very top of the iceberg here. Now, what could it possibly be? What could it possibly be? Well, it's the finished book. It is the finished book. Now, remember our initial quote that you will be rewarded in public for the work you do in private. Remember that? This is the only part of this whole process, this whole experience of being a writer, that is public. Because even what goes on inside the doors of your agent's offices and the publishing house, I mean, there are people there, but it's still pretty closely held. And this little slice, this tiny little slice of cake at the top of all of this, is public. It is what the world will see. The world will never see anything else that you've done. This is the sliver that is visible. All right. And so now you know why I call it the secret work of writers, because this is what it all boils down to. And the irony is, of course, that just as your work becomes public, just as the whole world is welcomed into your process, which obviously has been going on for some time by now, but just when it becomes something that you have to answer for in a public way, you lose all control of like being able to do anything else to it. Like, it's set now. You can't change it anymore. So all of a sudden it's like, it's out there, you're responsible for it, but you can't touch it, right? It's like, you have to think of it as like the book has been released into the wild. It's not yours anymore, right? It's not your pet anymore. It's just been set free. And it's a bittersweet feeling. I mean, it's a triumphant feeling, but it's also bittersweet. And readers are going to react the way they react. They're going to like it or not like it. They're going to buy it or not buy it. They're going to post reviews. They're going to talk about it. And you are now the one who can observe. It's all out there. The bathroom door has been flung open, but there's nothing you can do about it. So this is it. I hope that rewards will come, but remember, if the rewards do come for this book, they are not coming for the finished book. They are coming for all of the work you did in private. That's what the rewards are now coming from. All right. Now, we're not quite finished yet. I had said at the top that the last thing I was going to reveal about the secret work of writers was really the most important part. And I've already used up all my pyramid slices. So what could it possibly be? Let's think of it as the ground that this pyramid is standing upon. And as you can just see, what I've added below is your professional and personal development. Everything that I have talked about in this presentation today requires you to really show up and do a great deal of work, of very skilled and difficult and meticulous work in secret or privately, even when no one is watching. And for you to be able to do that, you have to develop your expertise. You have to learn your craft. And this is what I mean by professional development. you have to acquire the tools of your trade, right? You have to acquire the tools, you have to learn how to use them, and you have to keep them sharp. In order to be able to do all of this stuff, you need to know how to structure a story, how to write a scene. You need to know what are the essential skills of writing craft. You need to know how to approach revision by understanding what it is we're trying to do when we revise. And I hope that, one of the points that I really want you to take from this today is that none of this is really self-evident, because you don't get to see other writers do it. And you're not going to be able to figure it out just by ear. And if you do, you're going to miss some key things and run into problems. So you actually do need to study. You need to learn. You need to practice these skills, and you need to implement what you know. You really need to think about what your professional standard is as a writer. You have to seek it out, and you're going to have to work hard to acquire it. And it's a lifelong process. Attaining mastery in any discipline is a lifelong process. And I think this is great. And when I say in any discipline, I guess I should, single out. There are certain things that people attain mastery at and have a kind of a brief and glorious career. Like if you're an athlete or a dancer, just kind of traditionally, those are careers that just because of physical realities might not have a lifelong arc of achievement. But that is not true for artists, and it's not true for writers. Writers can start at any age, they can gain mastery and continue to improve at any age, and they can keep writing as long as you have the passion to write. So if you're a writer, congratulations, you're not going to get bored and you're not going to be forced to retire. But if you are struggling, and if you can relate to any of the struggles that I've talked about today, and you haven't really sought out some serious training in story structure and writing craft, I need you to ask yourself why you haven't. You're not going to go from intuitive amateur to actually being able to do a professional level engagement with all of the secret work that writers have to do without some guidance. You're not going to do it just tinkering about. You have to commit to your professional development, just like any other professional has to commit to their training. It's a commonplace saying, but you wouldn't want to have surgery with a surgeon who said, I just taught myself, I watched a couple of YouTube videos, I figured out how to do the operation. Like, no. It takes more than that. We want more than that. And so I just encourage you, this isn't a scolding, it's quite the opposite. I just want you to take your writing seriously. Like, give yourself the gift of taking this work seriously. You really love to do it. I've never met a writer who just woke up one day late in life and said, I'm just having a random whim to write. That's not what writers say to me. They come to me and they say, I've always wanted to be a writer. I've known since I was a kid. I've been struggling to do this for years, right? That's how writers talk to me. And I at that, consider it. If you're struggling to do something for years, if you wanted to do it for a long time, if it truly is your life's dream and you keep trying to talk yourself out of it, before you talk yourself out of it, why not get some training? Why not, take it seriously and really take a serious whack at it? There are so many ways to work on your craft. Start wherever you can. Reading books, watching YouTube videos is fine. Taking classes, getting into a program or a community like Path of the Storyteller, great options. There's just lots of stuff out there you can do. But take it seriously and do something. And then the very last thing I want to say here is personal development. What on earth do I mean by that? Well, you have to be, if you want to, be receptive and curious and have something to say that other people will benefit from hearing, you have to be an informed and open-hearted human being. You have to be curious about the world and curious about yourself. You don't have to have a fascinating life. You don't have to go watch the running of the bulls in Spain. You don't have to join, the Foreign Legion. You don't have to go out and have wild adventures so that you have something to write about. You're already a human being. So you already have in your heart and your body and your mind all of the expertise about what it feels like to be a human being, that you need to be a great novelist. You have it all inside you, but you have to observe it. You have to take note of it, all the feelings and the longings, the ups and downs, what it feels like to be in these human bodies of ours. Really take note of it. Don't settle for superficial answers. Don't make glib conclusions about yourself or others. People are complicated. We are filled with motives and longings, and we tend to long for all the same kinds of stuff, but our behavior truly does run the gamut, and it's fascinating. What's more fascinating than people, right? So this is why personal development is so important, because if you have a very slick command of story structure and writing craft, but you have no nuanced and compassionate understanding of the human condition, you're not going to be able to write great fiction. Full stop. The great writers that we admire are the ones that we say in wonder, like, how do they know so much about being human? Like, what did Shakespeare not know about being human? It's almost any experience, right? Any conceivable human experience is somewhere in his plays. Other writers are praised for that as well, and chances are the writers you love best have this quality. So that's what I mean by personal development. It is truly the bedrock that all of this other stuff sits on top of. Now, how long is all of this going to take? See, I read your minds. How long does it take to do all this work? How long does it take to achieve mastery? How long? I know. It feels like a lot. It will take your whole life. And I just want you to think of that as good news. We're never going to get to the end of it. And that's perfect. Like, you're going to start from wherever you are, and you're going to make progress every minute of every day. And there will always be more to learn. And that's what it's like to have a life as an artist. So I want you to realize it's not a race, that it's just an enrichment. It's just an enrichment of your whole life. It'll make every day of your life better. This constant striving for mastery and for expressing your creative self, right? I do want to share another quote from someone who has a less idealistic feeling about being a writer. Yes, Dorothy Parker. I think this is actually not firmly attributed to Dorothy Parker, but it is almost always casually attributed to Dorothy Parker. So we'll just let her have it. Who said famously, "I hate writing, but I love having written." And in the context of this talk today, what I get from this quote is that Dorothy Parker hates the secret work of writers, but she likes the rewards of it that she gets in public. Like, she just likes the tippy top of the pyramid, All the other stuff is a slog. Well, I think we can sympathize to some extent, but we also know that if Dorothy Parker wrote something that did get rewarded in public, it's because she did do the work in private. She did. She may not have liked it. She may be witty in her complaining about it, but she had to have done it. All right. So let us sympathize with Dorothy Parker, but also remember that the real solution here for all of us is to love the work, love the secret work. It's not going to be the part where you get that public reward. That's coming. You have to remember that so much of this is personal, private work. It's not what you do to get to the reward. It is this part of it that you need to love, because it's most of it. So we're kind of doing the opposite of Dorothy Parker here. We want to love the work itself. Yes, we will love having written, but I hope you will love writing too, because that's where most of your writing life is going to be, like down there in the part of the iceberg that's underneath the water. Now, I just want to add quickly, so we can wrap up soon, that the secret work, it does not have to be lonely. Some writers love solitude and thrive on it, but it doesn't have to be as lonely as it might perhaps look. You can find a community of writers to cheer you on. You will eventually, I hope and trust, that we'll find a community of readers as well. But having a community of writers who are down in the trenches there doing that secret stuff, so that you can at least be in the bathroom doing your hair together is really beneficial. And I think it, I hope I've made it clear why it's so beneficial, because not having it really is, it can really lead to a lot of self-doubt. And then as soon as we have a community of writers who are willing to say, well, this is what it looks like for me when I do my private work, my secret work. Oh, it's so validating because they're doing it too. They're struggling with it too. And it's never going to be like a group project. It's always going to be private in a sense and personal. I think most of us are glad that it's so personal because it's something that's deep and meaningful to us. But we get to love all the pieces of it. We get to love that random inspiration part. We love the mess, tromping around in the mud, finding the gold nuggets. We can love all the time that it takes. We can love the technique. We can love feeling like confident in the use of our tools. We can love learning new things and watching ourselves improve. We can love all the people we're going to meet on the journey, our fellow writers, yes, but love your agents and editors. Love your proofreaders. Love your copy editors. Love your booksellers. Love your readers, especially. Even love the people that give you bad reviews. That's all part of the path we've chosen here. So that's all something to bear in mind. And I particularly want to remind everyone out there, if you're watching this, chances are you have a little more experience than somebody in your life. And I want you to also show a little love to the newbie writers in your lives, because they truly don't know a lot of this stuff, and you can help them. You can, help them get that little peek behind the curtain of what it's really all about. And, see if you can just give them a little boost on their journey too. That will come back and repay you many times over. I'm so grateful that you were all here today. I'm going to end the presentation now and take a look at the comments and see if we've got any questions or stuff to bring into the discussion. I am just so delighted to see some folks here today. I already said hi to Hillary and Constanza. Cynthia is here. Erin is here. Meryl is here. I could not be more thrilled, Meryl. That is so terrific that you're here. Erin is here from Southern Indiana. I'm so, so, so delighted to have you here, Erin. Erin shares a comment. Let's just look at it. Let's see if we can give Erin a little encouragement. Erin says she's working on historical fiction. She's got her main character. The hero was easy. World building is fun. Awesome, Erin. But choosing the antagonist and narrowing the focus to create a story flow are very difficult. It sounds like, Erin, you are very productively standing in that muddy stream, because you talk about choosing the antagonist and narrowing the focus. So it sounds like you are the kind of writer that gathers more gold nuggets than you can use. What a happy problem to have. I'm going to hold total confidence in you, Erin, that you're going to, when you get all those gold nuggets lined up, that you're going to see which ones are most focused on triggering the exact journey of transformation that your hero most needs. And I encourage you to look at it that way when you choose. All right. We'll look forward to future updates from you, Erin. It sounds like you're really on to something. And Erin also asks, aren't plotting the story sequence and drafting the prose their own separate layers, right? So if you're asking Erin about drafting the structure, doing a structural draft versus plotting, some writers might approach them as separate tasks. And those writers tend to like outlines. Those writers tend to like to do a lot of plotting out the story sequence independently of trying to put anything on paper that feels like a novel or like an attempt to write fiction. So you're quite right. And if that's the way you like to work, have at it. But as I mentioned in the talk, not every writer likes to work that way. Some writers really do find it generative, part of their kind of creative standing in the stream place, to try to write some prose. And that in that sort of improvising on paper, that they will find their best gold nuggets. It's just a different inclination. And I just, even though I am a huge proponent of having a very technically solid grasp of story structure, I also know how important it is to some writers that they not be cut off from it's like the sketching part, you know, they can't really think of it until they're in the process of sketching it. So that's why I say that structural drafting is fine. It's just that we're not really terribly worried about language then. And we don't want to be attached to those little sketches that we write of what happens, because that's all likely to change. I am thrilled to see my friend Jeff here. Thanks for blowing a kiss, Jeff. I'm so pleased I blow one back at you. Aaron, you're having a really great experience today. I love all these comments that you've shared. This is where you stall, you do the research and map out a plot and get excited, and then don't know how to actually build the language. So it's interesting, right? I'm reading your comments one at a time. And now I can see that you have an approach where you literally do all of that work sort of separately from dealing with the language, but then you get stuck. Interesting. That's so interesting. I wonder, Aaron, if you're on my mailing list. I hope you are. Why don't you drop me a comment below so that I can find you, and maybe we can hop on a Zoom call or something. It just sounds like an interesting question that you've got here about process. But I really love that you've got focus on structure. It's much more common for writers to sort of get lost in the language and then say, "Whoops, I forgot to make a plot." But sometimes a writer will have this problem that you're describing, which is that they're like, "I've got the whole plot, I just don't know how to write it." So let's talk about that. Meryl, yes, I love it. Meryl, I'm going to end with Meryl's great comment. Take away the "I can't." Such good advice, Meryl. Meryl's a wonderful visual artist, among other things, and a writer as well, I know. And knows a lot about the creative process. And so Meryl says to us all, take away the "I can't." I'm very happy to leave the last word in Meryl's hands. Terrific. Thank you so much for that. All right, gang, I hope this talk was of benefit. If you're watching the replay and you too have comments or questions or want to go deeper into any of the things that we talked about today, please post them below. I will see them and I will answer. I once again invite you to help yourself to the download over at pathofthestoryteller.com/challenge. It's a collection of free writing prompts, and I think that it will help you get some stuff on the page. And maybe if you're not, thinking about story structure in a conscious way, it can just start to just warm up those muscles for you and get a feeling of what it's like to think in story structure as well. Once again, I'm here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. If there's something you'd like to hear me talk about on one of these live streams, leave a comment below. I love your suggestions. I'm always grateful when folks are here live. I'm grateful when they watch the replays. I consider you all members of the Path of the Storyteller community. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, happy writing.